In today's episode of Decoding Disinformation, we explore the silent storm gathering around environmental journalists in Italy, a country where covering pollution, energy companies, and even chemtrail conspiracies can result in online harassment, legal intimidation, or even worse. In a country where reporters face not just pressure from the corporate interests, but waves of coordinated hate, often invisible, often unreported. The new case study, A Rough Climate, breaks that silence. It's the first in Italy to combine deep investigative interviews with a wide-ranging quantitative analysis, revealing a troubling pattern of threats and the ecosystems behind them. Joining me today are the authors of the report, Marta Frigiero and Gianluca Liva. Together, we'll unpack what's happening behind the screens and what it means for journalism, for democracy, and for our climate future. Marta, Gianluca, welcome to the show. Let me welcome them right now. So, how are you? Thank you very much for joining our podcast, Decoding Disinformation.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much. So let's start, and as we usually say, let's start at the beginning. So this is a very powerful and deeply layered, piece of reporting. So what made you want to investigate the intersection between environmental journalism and online threats, and also why now?
Well, attacks or threats to journalists covering environmental issues, especially the one related to pollution or while investigating some company, they are nothing new at all. But over the years, however, thanks to an increasing environmental attention, a general environmental attention, we observe also raising interest by journalism in covering environmental issues. And the obvious consequence was an increase in the number of attacks reported by journalists. By the way, today we are at a sort of crossroad, let's call it so, because for the first time after a lot of time, we are seeing, once we believed was a little minority, the ones jeopardizing the scientific fundamentals of describing the climate crisis. Okay? Now they are gaining ground again. Okay? And this leads to some recurring strategies in laughing about the journalistic work covering environmental issues, and a lot of times attacking it, threatening the authors of an investigation or an article dealing with, yes, pollution, but also with many, many other topics related to the environment. So that's why our research, our analysis was, a need for this specific Italian moment in environmental journalism.
Mm-hmm. Marta?
Yeah, I do agree with Gianluca. Our research is quite a unique case because for the first time we also gather data and we are able to show the real amount of cases and how big and how serious the situation is here in Italy.
Mm-hmm. I think that it actually gathers the amount of cases that have been reported or that have been monitored, right? Because I think that one of the highlights of this case study is something very critical, is that many journalists never report the threats that they receive, right? So why do you think this silence persists, especially among freelancers?
The journalists I spoke to told me that they often feel alone, even within the journalism community. And there's this sense that institutions are kind of distant and not really there when you need them. And there's also a fear around speaking out because people worry that there could be backlash. And some of them told me that since they are freelancers, they just don't have time or money to take the case to court, even if they wanted to. And some colleagues told me that they don't even know that there are services available, and the services are sometimes for free.
I mean, we will talk a little bit later on in this podcast about the possible solutions, right? But one of the, but what I want our audiences to understand, all these challenges and the chilling effect of these threats on journalists covering the climate crisis through one specific example, right? And for me, one of the most shocking stories in the study is about the journalist Francesca Santolini, right? So can you walk us through that case, please?
Yes. It was the 30th of July 2024, and Francesca Santolini was a guest on a popular Italian evening television program. And where there were many topics discussed, from politics to economics and environment. Francesca Santolini, in that occasion, described a link between the defense of fossil fuels and the economic model behind the fossil fuel industries, and conservative tendencies of white patriarchy. And, her speech happened around 10 p.m. in the evening, and half an hour later, the first reaction began to be published on social media, especially on X, former Twitter. During the next days, on the 1st of August, there was the first tweet by an account with a lot of followers. And that was the moment when the case began, okay? With a huge flow of sharing the same video of Santolini's speech on TV, mocking her, insulting her, harassing her, and threatening her. This flow reached its climax on the 3rd and on the 4th of August, with two articles mocking her speech on two important Italian online magazines and on the blog of an important Italian journalist. And it was just the first wave, because on December, there was a second wave of attacks to Francesca Santolini, publishing the same video of the same TV appearance of the 30th of July. So a lot of months later. But it's not over, because recently we are observing a third wave of attacks to Francesca Santolini. But this time they are not happening on X, Twitter, but they are happening elsewhere, like on Instagram.
Sorry, and what are the consequences? I mean, have you spoken with Santolini, with Francesca? What was her reaction? What kind of impact, this kind of the three waves actually had on her?
Well, in my opinion, and I want to underline it, it's just my opinion, Santolini's got a reacted with a lot of rationality. Okay, so she decided to observe, collect, and analyze too this flow of attacks and insults, saving web pages, comments, screenshotting everything, and talking with the right person to keep observing these flows of attacks before taking any possible decision.
So she basically put in practice her journalistic skills. Let's put it this way, right?
Yes. Yes, we can say.
in order to front
Yeah,
that.
but I want to add that she decided or she had to close her X account. So she had to leave the platform.
That is an important consequence as well, because X, I mean, probably now a little bit less, right? But for a long time, X has been, the platform where journalists were able to promote, their work. They were able to communicate to a big audience. So that kind of consequence, it's also, an impact of these 3 waves of attacks, right? I was thinking that, look, we're talking about Francesca Santolini. For people within the Italian context, or Italian people, I'm sure that they know. If they don't know her, they know, the newspapers where she works, and they know the TV station where she works. But what I'm thinking is, what about all these local journalists, more unknown people? What do they face the same kind of risks, or have you already, talked to any of them? What are their stories, and what their stories reveal to you about what it is working in a smaller, environment where everyone knows you?
Yes, local journalists are really on the front lines and they are familiar faces in their communities, which in a way makes them even more exposed. I collect one case, Nuri, and her case is disturbing. She told me that she got a death threat delivered by hand, and this means someone literally followed her from the newsroom all the way home. And she covered environmental issues in a city in northern Italy. And the point is that she has a non-Italian name and surname. And that was actually one of the reasons she was targeted. The letter was full of racist insults and death threats. And then I spoke with Luciano. He's a freelance journalist working in Puglia. And he reported on pollution and illegal fishing. And because of that, he has been attacked both online and in real life. Anyway, this hasn't changed his approach and his way of doing journalism at the forefront.
What are their last names, Nuri and Luciano, and why we cannot say where do they work?
Yeah, and Nuri was particularly shocked by the letter, so she wanted to share her case with me, but she asked me to remain anonymous. Luciano also wants to remain anonymous, but they both want to share their cases and they both want to speak and openly about what happened.
It is important for the audience, right, to understand that even journalists, working journalists, are we need to, whenever we are reporting on them, right, like in your case, we need to protect some part of their identities in order to protect themselves, right? So this gives, the audience an idea of the level of the chilling effect that this kind of threats, of campaigns actually take on journalists reporting on climate issues, very much on an environmental level. What really, I think that you were also talking about this in the first question, right? What really sets this report apart is the quantitative analysis and also the qualitative analysis. So maybe first we can jump into the qualitative analysis, because we've been talking about, Santolini, now the cases of local or of local journalists or local reporters, but you guys have been actually like interviewing many more, journalists, and I think that this is important to understand what these journalists have told you, and also what kind of stories have you heard. And also I have the feeling that this is kind of an untold story in Italy, right? So I don't know if you can walk us through some of these interviews.
Yes, I interview dozens of colleagues and journalists. Some of them want to share their names. Some of them want to remain completely anonymous. they told me that they are always under pressure. There's this feeling of self-censorship, the feeling that they cannot write and talk openly about certain topics, certain companies, and this put them under great pressure. But they wanted to share the story. They got the feeling that for the first time, their story was important, was meaningful. And even though they tried to protect themselves, they were very open and willing to talk to me, to open up and to write what happened to them. And then Gianluca did an amazing job analyzing all the reports of attack we found.
Perfect. Let's jump into it. So we're going to talk now about the quantitative analysis, and basically it's the first of its kind in Italy, analyzing the number of climate journalists or journalists covering climate, and environmental issues being targeted and attacked. So what are the results of the analysis, Gianluca?
Well, we analyzed 3,025 different reports of attacks, threat, and intimidation against Italian journalists dealing with any topic, from organized crime to sports. Okay? And we were able to highlight 114 cases involving journalists who were working directly to environmental issues. We highlighted that this event occurred during investigation on pollution or investigation against companies or similar stuff, but with a good amount of cases about journalists reporting on consequences of climate crisis, for example, or even to people reporting on a seismic event, an earthquake. Okay? Anyway, our analysis got some limitations, and that lead us to state that our final result, 114 environmental cases, is an absolute underestimate, and it hides many other events, environmental related, that were never ever reported. And our analysis, if I may describe really quickly our methodology.
Yeah, that it's actually really important. Thank you.
Yes, it is. Our analysis was based on mainly on two different data sets. The only two available reporting cases from Italy. The first one was the one published by Ossigeno per l'Informazione, and it is an important association of journalists in Italy dealing with threats to journalists. And they reported 2,322 different cases dealing with with any topic, journalist related, starting from 2006 until 2025, till nowadays. The second data set was the one provided by the European Center for Press and Media Freedom, and it included 757 different cases happened in Italy. But there were some overlap between the two sources, and we have also to normalize the two data sets. Different years were collected in different ways, with different criteria, with different categories. So we have to standardize the two data sets and create one unique data set, the one with 3,000 reports. Then we were able, thanks to a lot of data scraping and thanks to a lot of some help of some experts, we were able to identify 3 different categories of reports. The first one was the cases that were definitely related to the environment, 114. The second one were the cases that definitely were not related to the environment, and they were almost 2,000. And then, obviously, the rest could not be verified. At the same time, we sent a lot of emails to every regional journalism union, asking them if they had some report of attacks to environmental journalists locally. We didn't get a lot of results, and so this is how we did to reach the final result of 114 different environmental reports, a total underestimate of the actual situation.
Yeah, because there are a lot of the, as we've just discussed, right? A lot of the journalists, or many journalists, refrain from reporting, threats against them, or even some sort of a smear campaigns and intimidation online, because they know that nothing will happen, and actually can put them even in more danger, right? So we've talked about the we've talked about the content of the attacks. We talked about the impact of the attacks. We talked about the quantity of the attacks of online harassment and other kind of threats, obviously targeting climate journalists in Italy. So we're telling an untold story. What I want to analyze now is where all these kind of threats is sustained. So let's talk about the system now. And the ecosystem of these accounts, especially talking about Francesca Santolini, right? So you also analyzed the social media activity, identifying the patterns in the use of emojis, for example, and other symbols. So what did you learn about the online hate sort of subcultures and how they communicate, how they coordinate, where do they coexist?
Yeah, it is correct to call it an ecosystem, but it is an ecosystem that is ready to take action. Okay, it is a network of people and boats, of course. They share the same principles, the same beliefs. Including principles about how to behave with other people while discussing with them. And this ecosystem includes a lot of stakeholders. And usually, when a journalist or a blogger takes a critical position, and this network is ready to attack her or him. And they set up maybe an involuntary but already organized campaign, a proper campaign that leads to the ridiculization of the subject. And the victim, that's an important phenomenon, the victim is like branded. Okay, and in the specific case of Francesca Santolini, she was really branded as that woman talking and associating white patriarchy with fossil fuels. And they started ridiculizing her, laughing at her. That's how the subject, the victim, it becomes the target, and to be the target is underlined by the specific emoji of the target. And it's the final brand. It's like a tattoo. Okay. Santolini at that moment, she became one of the enemies. Okay. And there are a lot of common enemies in these networks. And it's like, again, like the waves I described in the Santolini case, it is like if the mugshot of the enemy continues to circulate, to be shared on their various social media, according to the year, according to the moment, according to the case. But it's something recurring at that time.
Mm-hmm. So it seems that there is a system in place and also a pattern of action, right? In the sense that whomever of these accounts, let's say, points the finger to who is the target towards, what's the next objective, the next target, then kind of the way that you describe it is that it feels like the rest of the accounts sort of organically pick up on the message, on that brand, on the label, and disseminate it further. So do you have the feeling that that this kind of messaging reaches a wider audience beyond the ecosystem where do they operate?
Yeah, for sure. For instance, a post on Instagram received hundreds and hundreds of comments and likes and was reshared a lot. So there's, of course, this in-group and out-group, I would say, but those campaigns can also reach a broader audience and they can spread very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also because you were mentioning that one of the actors, so at the beginning of this conversation, right? One of the actors was also an imported journalist, so that has their own follows and followship, right? One of the things that struck me in this report is the phrase and quote unquote, this is an invisible landscape of attacks. Do you feel that Italy's journalistic institutions are equipped to respond to this phenomenon, especially because you've been reaching out to them?
So I've been a member of the Order of Journalists for almost 13 years. And over the past decade, I've seen a real shift within the order. There's more openness and attention towards new form of journalism, so freelance, investigative reporting, and international project. I do think institutions are starting to move in the right direction. Let's not forget the great work Ossigeno per l'Informazione is doing to support freelancers. What we are hoping is that this investigation can also be a starting point and a way to start a deeper conversation within the institutions.
Mm-hmm. And what is this conversation? How this conversation can actually go about? What kind of support do you think the journalists need?
Yeah, I talk about this investigation with the Order of Journalists from Lombardia and the Journalist Union, and they are really open to listening and they are interested in following the case and offering support. They're actually the first point of contact for anyone who gets targeted. And I really encourage fellow journalists to report any kind of incident to them. The Order of Journalists is also offering a free legal service before the publication for their members, and I think that's such an important and valuable source. And there's also Ossigeno per l'Informazione, as Gianluca said, is an organization that is doing an amazing job, and journalists can get their help for free. But honestly, I think journalists need a broader support in Italy, also from politics and institution SLAPs. So those strategic lawsuits to shut people up are on the rise, and that puts investigative journalists under great pressure. So yes, I think journalists can have and can find the right support within the institution, but we need a shift. We need to change our approach towards journalists, toward investigation. And honestly, at the time being, it's not easy for journalists to write in Italy.
Mm-hmm. I think that also the way that both of you have described the situation in Italy, and also what these reports highlights, is that there is a need to raise awareness as well, not only among the general public, but also among the institutions themselves, the journalist associations, but even among the very same newsrooms as well, and news outlets. That they are also aware that some of their journalists are being targeted, and they don't feel encouraged to come forward and to report about it, and to also pay attention to what's going on with their freelancer communities, right? Or the freelancers that they hire. So I think that this report, this case study that the two of you have worked, so much, and it's an incredible job, because it puts basically words and numbers to an untold story. So hopefully this is the like a starting point for the conversation, for a future conversation following it up. Finally, is there any message you want to our listeners, which some of them are journalists themselves as well? Do you want to give them any message to take away from this report? And if so, what would that be? This is an open question to the two of you.
Well, if I may, doing the analysis on X social media, I've learned that gaining data will be even more difficult. Everything changed since the last changes in Twitter ownership. And I think I'm observing, that we are going far beyond the concept of the echo chambers in the public online discussion. Maybe a lot of time moving on different social media where you can create a comfortable ecosystem for your ideas. It already happened. Okay? And I observe on X how it wasn't possible to generate a third wave of insults on that social media, because there were no more targets on the other side of the discussion. Okay, and I
Because
observed a lot of
Santolini has cancelled, because Santolini shut
yeah,
down her account.
yeah, of course, but also a lot of people closed
Have left,
their
yeah,
account. Okay,
of
so
the platform, yeah.
there was no more, let's say, uh, human material to offend and to argue with. Okay? And we will see what will happen in the public discussion.
Marta, final
So,
thought, comment
yeah,
to our colleagues?
as I said, I see this publication as just the beginning and the start of a bigger investigation to gather more stories and more voices. And to my fellow journalists, I just want to say you are not alone, and we are not alone. Speak up, share your story. There are people out there ready to listen and ready to help you.
Thank you very much. Marta, Gianluca, thank you for your time, and most of all for your commitment to telling these stories. A rough climate isn't just a report, it's kind of a wake-up call, right? It challenges us to see threats not as an isolated incident, but as part of patterns, a pattern that basically we must confront. And to our listeners, if today's episode made you reconsider what journalism looks like at a time when climate crisis is a fact, it's a reality, it's not a matter of opinion, we encourage you to read the full case study. It's available on IPI's Observatory on Disinformation Narratives. And think about this, even emojis aren't innocent anymore. Just like what we saw earlier in other episodes with the Hahachi operation targeting factography in Croatia, a rough climate shows how something as simple as an emoji can become a symbol of mockery, of targeting, and of hate. Culture, context, and subtext matter a lot. Thank you for joining us on the Decoding Disinformation podcasts. Thank you very much to our guests today. Again, Marta and Gianluca. We'll be back next time with more stories from the front lines of the digital trenches. Until then, stay curious, stay critical, and as always, stay informed. Thank you.